Here.
Here.
Present.
Yes.
Present.
Yes. Let us bow our heads for the beauty of this day and for all of your grace that surrounds us. Touch us, sensitize us, and let your discerning spirit be among us. Be with us as we deliberate, as we discuss and talk. Let this be for the benefit of our beloved city. Amen.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
Mayor and council, welcome back. We had a little bitty break, and lots of work going on in the meantime. So today's work session is probably part one of maybe two or three, because there's lots of follow-up items from our budgetary discussions and approvals. And we wanted to try to arrange the topics in an order that makes some sense. So obviously dealing with some funding sources today. There's some additional funding sources that'll come up as we proceed forward with additional work sessions, all in the attempts of ultimately getting to some very important discussions about capital projects, some special projects, some things that I know that you all reference as being priority items through your retreat discussions that deal with beautification and cleanliness and homelessness and lots of important topics. And so today, the importance of getting the hospitality tax, state accommodations tax, and tourism development fee funding sources on the table was to also not get those out of the way, but to put them out there in case you may decide this year to look at doing things a little bit differently, and if it frees up any opportunities for us as we are approaching some other big ticket items that we need to take care of as a city. So making sure the committee recommendations are addressed first, some of the standing entities that you deal with, in hopes that we also can make sure there's a fair discussion. I think that's a term I've heard, to get us to a place where perhaps some of these funding sources are utilized from additional things that benefit our community as well. So with that said, you know, we have traditionally, or you may or may not remember, some of you, when you have a work session the same day as a council meeting, we put a caption on your council meeting agenda that if there's anything from the work session that you wanted to take up during the council meeting, there's sort of that option for you to do that, because traditionally you don't vote during a work session. I know some of these items are so important, and I know we have lots of people here looking for some clarity on recommendations for their entities. If you are interested in taking up a vote today, then you may want to deal with that right now, so everyone is clear that you might be doing a vote this evening.
I've already asked the clerk to prepare an amendment to the agenda tonight to put this on the agenda tonight.
Is that the consensus to do that?
H and A. So we can get it decided tonight.
What happens if we don't finish all of it?
Well, hopefully we will come to a consensus this afternoon, and then can vote on it tonight. If we don't come to a consensus, we'll carry it over.
Second.
Well, that's just in
I'll
order
second
for you all. So you all want us to do that at the beginning of the council meeting? You'll take
Yeah,
up that amendment?
I've asked the clerk to give me an amendment to put it on the agenda for tonight, in case, just like we used to do. We used to say that if something comes up, as you just said.
Yes, sir. I was just concerned because we didn't have it on the agenda, so I was sort of laying that out for the public to hear, that you will do that potentially tonight, since we didn't have that referenced on your agenda that way. All right, with that said, we'll move forward with our hospitality tax item, which includes committee recommendations, line item agency allocations, and other allocations and special projects. Ms. Missy Kaufman, our Budget Program Management and Grants Director, will take you through these fiscal year 22-23 budget special revenue funds.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Wilson, Mayor and Council. It's good to be here today. As Ms. Wilson mentioned, we have a number of topics that we are planning to bring back for continued discussions, and trying to bring them in a way that flows for conversation and some other inputs with decision-making as we proceed through remaining budget items. So today, we'll be talking specifically H-Tax and A-Tax as mentioned. The first part, so we'll do 3 parts for the hospitality tax, and I would like to take a moment to acknowledge we do have committee members with us today that are here today for the Hospitality Tax Committee. We were glad that City Council decided to bring back the H-Tax Committee this year after being suspended 2 years during the pandemic. So it's excitement that there were funds available and that we have activities and events in which to fund. So it's good to see the committee back. And thank you for your time and being here today. We also have the line item agency allocations for consideration. Other allocations or special projects or some other items that have come up during discussions for discussion today, if that is City Council's will, or for continued discussions at a future date. We'll also discuss state accommodations tax. Again, that one has committee recommendations. And then just for information and just overview as regards to the tourism development fee. So that sort of rounds out some of our special revenues. And again, this is building on some additional conversations as we proceed with other items in future budget workshops. As again mentioned, we can come back to this part in terms of what other items we would want to bring forward for City Council consideration with regards to future discussions regarding capital projects, community promotions, an ARPA update, and some other items that City Council has asked for continued discussions. With regards to the hospitality tax, the budget that was approved for hospitality tax for fiscal year 22-23 is $12.7 million. Of that, City Council allocated $3 million specifically for the Hospitality Tax Committee. Included in your packets and material was a recommendation from the Hospitality Tax Committee for allocation to the groups that applied. As you may recall, we had a fewer number of applicants this year and a little bit more funding available. So there's both the committee recommendations, but then there's also recommendations for not all the funds that were allocated to possibly come back for a second round, if you will, of considerations. That's one of the items also on for City Council's consideration today. So in your packet again is the committee recommendations based on the applications that were submitted for hospitality tax for this year. The other allocations from hospitality tax includes the debt service, which includes this existing debt service schedule of $2.5 million, and then the transfer to the general fund. So the pending decisions from the hospitality tax funds, again, is the allocation for recommendations from the H-Tax Committee. There's available $2.5 million for allocation to the remaining items, which includes line item agencies and some additional allocations for some other special projects or line item type request. I'm sorry, that's $3.5 million. So I don't have any slides with regards to the committee allocations. I don't know if there's any questions or conversations that you have about the H-Tax Committee request.
I've got some proposed changes to not the line item ones, but to the committee decided ones. How do you want to take them up there?
Are we starting with the line item agencies, or are you starting with the committee?
I don't have a slide specifically, so we can go start with the H-Tax Committee if you have any points of discussion there.
That's fine if we want to start, and we can go around the room and everybody can have their input.
So is that the line item or the?
That's the
Committee.
committee recommendations.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir, Mr. Wall.
I got 3 recommendations on the committee assignments. 2 of them deal with the Vista Gill and the 5 Points Association, 2 associations. Both of them had clean and safe allocations in previous years, and this year, the Vista Guild got left off of the 115,000 for Clean and Safe got left off, and they were, the committee recommendation was for 300,000. I'm gonna recommend we put that back to 415, which is what they got last year. And on the Five Points Association, they asked for 690,000, but just like the Vista Guild, they did not get their Clean and Safe put in, and that would be another 100 and, let's see. Last year, they got 355, which included the Clean and Safe. They asked for 690 because of the 2 years that they were not able to have their biggest fundraiser, which is the 5 Points, and their funds have been decreased in the last 2 years to the point where they think they're gonna need some help to put on the 5 Points premier event of St. Patrick's Day. They also point out the increased cost, both of the bands, but also the police and the other things like the fencing and the porta-johns and things like that came in. So I'm recommending we move that from 300 to 500 to give them back their funds from last year plus a little bit more. And the last one that I had is the Columbia Classical Ballet. Their recommendation was 125,000. I think Ms. Lumpkin has made a persuasive argument that with the Brooklyn Mac coming into their, what you call that thing, troupe, corps, dance group. Anyway, Brooklyn Mac is a local person. He is going to be split between London and Columbia, and he needs an assistant, and they're asking for 25,000. So those are my three requests: 25,000 for the classical ballet, move it to 415 for the Vista Guild, and 500 for the 5 Points.
What did you put down for the ballet?
It would be 150 when you add the 25.
Oh, let me ask you.
So you want an increase so far, that's $340,000. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Oh, you mean total?
Yeah.
If you did the math, I'll offset that.
No, I understand. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. And of course, I agree with this, but I agree with the configuration of these figures. Let me ask you this. Either one, all three of these organizations, we know what COVID did to all of us and to all of our organizations. I guess what I'm asking is, where was the skin in the game on each one of these organizations?
Well, the skin in the game for the 5 Points Association is they weren't able to have their premier event for 2 years. I remember when I first got involved in the H-Tax, they were telling me that they had 2 years of money banked so that they could have their event, even if they would have their funding even if it rained out the event. Well, we've had 2 years of COVID, so they've used up their
Reserve.
fund balance, and I think moving them to 500 would give them some. Yeah, they had it this year, but they missed 2.
What was the bottom line for the year that we had it? We know we didn't have it for 2 years. But what about this last?
Well, our bottom line was 355,000. That's what they got last year.
So the additional porta-johns and that sort of thing?
I'm giving them the 355 plus enough to give them a little bit of boost towards the porta-johns and the fencing and the police and all of that.
So are we just going around first and, okay.
Does 5 Points have the merchants provided an operations plan for their clean and safe? Is that something that they provide the city in the packet that they submit for H-Tax money?
It would include the budget for those
Just the
activities.
budget, not the actual work order and everything.
Right.
Thank you.
Reverend McDowell, did you have any
No, I'm fine.
recommendations?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the three organizations that Howard is referencing, that, I wanted to see whether or not there were some reserves, and of course, what I'm hearing is that there were not, and that's making up the reserves that were expended.
That's getting them back to last year plus a little bit for future.
Yeah, I'm fine. 50%, that's correct. Yes, last year plus 50%.
They asked for 690.
I mean, I don't have any problem with that.
That's what's on the thing.
Miss Herbert?
I looked through these. Less applicants, stay pretty close to the requested amount, and I think the committee's done a good job with their recommendations. None stick out to me as of right now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Committee chair is also here if we do have any questions for.
So if we are talking about some of these entertainment districts and kind of meeting them where they are with some of their requests, the only one that I see that there's a large discrepancy is the Divine Street Association. They asked for 100,000 and we recommended, or the committee recommended 60,000. I just think that we should be consistent across, some of our H-tax revenue generating areas. If we're going to, meet ones, then we need to consider kind of looking at what some of the other entertainment districts are doing as well.
They had 8,518 carry forward, so that would get them up to 68. Yeah, you put them at 100?
Again, have they provided the action for the increase, or new programming, new clean and safe along Divine Street? Is that something that the council can see from the applications?
The application, what's on the summary, does indicate what
It's
the
just-
request is for. So yes, this is for publication, this is for promotion and marketing of their events and
Okay,
activities.
just for marketing,
Right.
the 100, okay.
Can we circle back around? I didn't realize the committee chair was here, I should have. Can I get a better understanding, I think I understand it, but a better understanding of why the South Carolina Women's Leadership Network was not funded? I got a call about it. I'm not saying I disagree with it, but I just for the record, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that group asked for money for 2 different events. One of the events was a dinner, and we traditionally never fund dinners, galas, walks, runs, because there are so many of them. So that one we wouldn't have even considered. The other one is a very small focused group. Like most of the things you see that we fund in H-tax is open, anybody can come. This is specifically for women who have or are considering running for public office, about 200 people. So it really didn't fall within what we typically fund.
Thank you. I just wanted on the record.
First off, let me say, having looked at the hospitality tax as a private citizen for a long time, I think y'all did a really nice job this year reviewing everything. I think more discipline than I've seen in a long time, and I want to congratulate you for that. Just a couple of things. On the 5 points, I have to tell you, I don't mind taking them up to the clean and safe, but on the extra $150,000, I think we need to see some budgets or something. I just don't know if it's our responsibility to pay for higher price bands and things. And I would
point out to the council that one of the things that we discussed recently, and this may not be the year to start, or it may be the year to start it when we look at the carry forwards to allocate down the line, is how do we use some of these funds to beautify and increase the appearance of our entertainment districts. I mean, there were some suggestions made by city staff where we might fund flowers and plants and things like that, you know, and, you know, out of this for say 5 Points and for Vista. And I really do think that's one of the things we have to look at. It's a weed killer. We need that too. But I think that's one of the things we gotta look at. My brain works faster than my mouth, which is a good thing most of the time. I do think we gotta really and truly start thinking in terms of how we use these funds to make our place look better. You know, not just about, you know, it's not just about buying bands and doing this and doing that, but again, you know, street treatments and things like that. So again, I don't know if this is the time. I think probably next spring when we look at the balance would be the right time for that. I also think we've got to begin to start thinking about harvesting a little bit. When we start talking about areas that collect a lot of H-tax. We do very little out there. So I would be reluctant to move 5 Points past the clean and safe number until we get a little bit more of a hard number. Just saying, what was the clean and safe number?
355 last year.
Yes, 55,000 more. I think there was a lot. I'm fine to move the Vista one up there the same way. And again, like I say, I think they did a really nice job this year.
Can we, we're gonna have about 450,000 left over for what the committee said might be a second round.
That's right.
Could we make a stipulation that we move this to the 355 and then let them apply for the additional funds in the second round?
Well, I don't think you have to stipulate that. I mean, I think they can
The
apply.
stipulation was you couldn't apply for the second round if you got funded in the first round.
Well, again, I would have to tell you, I would prefer that we keep things separate here too, by the way. You know, since we don't have a budget, that this is for the clean and safe and the yellow shirts down there and everything else. And if they want to make an application, because again, sometimes I wonder if it's appropriate for us to fund fundraisers, use tax money to fund a fundraiser that generates funds to go somewhere else. So,
That's what all of this is.
no, sir. I don't think Mr. And again, I don't think the ballet
it's all-
dancer's a fundraiser.
Well, can we, speaking of ballet, can we go back
Well,
after you're, are you done? Okay.
Like I say, so I would say if they want to come back and make an application for some kind of supplement for that St. Patrick's Day celebration, I'd be happy to take a look at it. But again, I do think we're going to have to start looking and thinking about how we use these monies to help make these places look better. And while I respect our local talent and stuff, again, I have some questions if we should be just, I would prefer seeing a funding request for additional money, not for a specific person.
Well, they did, but their application was for 690.
The email I got was for a specific person about asking for the increase. And I'm not. You're talking about ballet. Yeah, I'm talking about. He's gone into ballet.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm that's, you know, I'm sure, you know, both big personality folks. And I know that's been a
So-
question for a long time, but again, I think if we just hold those in place, but really and truly, I would encourage us as we look forward to figure out how we can take some of this H-tax money going forward and make the city look better.
So I wanted to go back to the ballets and ask if our chair could explain. So Ann Brody's Carolina Ballet, you all are recommending that that is met. And if I am correct, Ann Brody's Carolina Ballet is affiliated with the Columbia Music Festival Association, which is a line item. And then we have the City Ballet and the Classical Ballet, both of which we are not meeting their request. And so I'd love to learn more. First of all, we have 3 ballets, which is crazy, but
Right, we have
Learn a
3
little bit more.
ballets. Now, the Ann Brody's ballet is a training ballet. The other 2 are professional ballets. CMFA is a fiscal agent of Ann Brody's Carolina Ballet, so they're not, they're two separate entities. The other two ballets, which are professional ballets, the classical ballet, Lee's group, is just not as active, as strong as Carolina Ballet. Yeah, performance-wise, and with Brooklyn Mac, he hasn't accepted the permanent position. So even though you cited him, he could actually be gone if something better came along. So that's
can you-
kind of an issue.
Did they share where they put these shows on? Are they in the city limits or are they?
Oh, they're in the city limits.
Can I ask you a question, are you through?
And then in terms of continuing conversation about the activeness of the two ballets, so I see that City Ballet requested 250 and you all are requesting 180. How did you all come to that number?
Well, after looking at their needs and hearing from their presentation, we determined that 180 was really going to meet their needs for this year.
Do you remember what they were going to spend, what they are saying that this would be spent on? So I know we talked a little bit about
pull it up.
classical, but I'm interested in City and Carolina.
You have all the applications? Oh, I can look it up online. Just give me a quick minute here. All right, their budget, 202,000, they're using, this is what they requested. They were gonna spend 202,000 on advertising and 48,000 on entertainment and artists.
Thank you.
And they anticipated, as far as total source amount for funding, $1,356,000. Of that, 250 request was city age tax.
No, thank you. That was helpful.
Sure.
Just, before you leave, Ms. Davis, have we ever, and the question, whether this is, you can spend H-tax on it or not, I just don't know the answer to that, but have we ever looked at offering any kind of training or any kind of classes and development and things like that for our nonprofits in town and these groups? I mean, and should we have an ongoing program? I mean, I've been cursed or fortunate, how you want to look at it, to serve on they come close to every board in Columbia, I think. And again, don't mean this in as negative a way as it's going to sound, but in most of them, it's easier for them to come to the city and apply for money for H-tax than it is for them to raise it in the community. And I just wonder sometimes if we would do a better service. I'll never forget during the recession, I was on the Columbia Museum of Art board at the time, and everybody got cut way back. And I won't call the name, but one of our musical groups got cut way back, and they got very entrepreneurial, got very creative, put packages together, really worked in the community, reached outside of Columbia up to Lake Murray and other places and sold these tickets, and their attendance actually went up during the recession. But the sad part was we got out of the recession and they got their city money back and they quit selling the things and the attendance went back down. So, I mean, have we ever looked at any programs or continuing type education programs?
Well, I can tell you that within the hospitality tax program, if a group wants to be mentored by an experienced group that has gotten funds, mentoring opportunities are offered. Now, I think it'd be great if y'all would like to create a workshop and get experts in to talk to people about not only government funding, but private funding and how to do that. But I'm not aware of anything
Well,
available.
I mean, if the committee were to
We
ever
do-
take a
oh,
look at that,
Missy's telling me we do it.
We have done it, we have done it, we will do it again.
Okay.
Together SC also actively promotes and utilizes this, but capacity building is a concern, I think, just in general across nonprofits, especially with fundraising and managing of those grants and opportunities. But we do try to help provide information as we get available, and then also point folks.
Can
to
we look at
places like
inputting
Together
maybe
SC.
one of those for this fiscal year? It would be, would be something I'd be really interested in
Right,
helping with.
we will at least do a workshop prior to the application process, so, because we encourage, obviously, additional funding besides just city funding.
But I don't think those workshops go into the kind of detail.
Probably
he's
not,
talking
right,
about.
right.
It's something we ought to think about, because if
partner
you
with
look
some of
across
the
the country leveraging, we're having to do the same thing. As we go to the federal government, we go to everywhere else, we're having to look how to leverage, and most communities today are doing PPPs, which is philanthropy and public and private partnerships, and I think it'd be well worth us spending some money to help people so that they can grow it, because the more it grows, that means more people are eating out. That means we're getting more attractions. As we know, we get 15 million visitors here, only 5 million spend the night. So if they got more reason to spend the night, that means we're making more money. That means our hotels and our downtown and our restaurants are all growing. So I'd love for us to figure out, and maybe we could work with the committee to come up with a structure and find the right person to come and sit down and present and show opportunities. I had a discussion today with somebody of similar nature that, there's a lot of generous people in our community, and we need to learn how to work together to access those dollars to improve our community. It can't just be government.
That was a big conversation during COVID with Central Carolina Community Foundation, United Way, and Together SC. And there are some opportunities, I think even some funding specifically to help do that, but we're glad to help partner as well with that type of facilitating those kind of discussions. The grant management alone it's an effort, so it makes us easier, because even though I'm sure some of our applicants would not agree that our grants are that easy to manage, but it's probably easier than some of the federal and other state grants that are available.
Yes, ma'am.
Another question that came up is, I know you had mentioned that we don't typically fund dinners and walks, but we do have a domestic violence walk that's being allocated for. What is different
We're
about
not
it?
funding the walk. If you look at the application, what they're doing is a walk, and then at the end of that, they're having a little festival at the park. And we didn't fully fund what they asked for. What we're funding is after the walk, where they have vendors and rides and things like that.
Ms. Herbert or Reverend McDowell, did you have any? Okay. Do you?
I'll be right, I'll come right to you.
Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Ms. Davis, while you're there, I'm just curious, just something that stuck out to me, and I know there's a reason behind it, but there were several events that got almost double, and one of them's got almost 70% more than they've gotten in the past.
Could you point out one just for me to,
Well, I mean, if I
Address
just
it
look, if
specifically?
I look, and it's a great event, but if you look at 2019 appropriation for Columbia International Festival, it was 23,000, and they went to 100. What's helpful for us is to understand the backstory, because I know what's going to happen. We're going to get phone calls when this is all over and saying, well, what about our group? Why do all the same groups get all the money? And so understanding the background is very helpful.
well, in this one in particular, he brings in a tremendous number of people.
I don't disagree with you.
And in the past, we've had less money to allocate. So while he asked for much more, we had to cut him back. This year with a little extra funding and knowing how successful his program is, we went ahead and gave him additional money. We did have one committee member who has worked or participated with that event and gave us, a encouragement on that as well. So we were looking at between 80 and 100, and we felt like this year we could afford to give them 100.
Yeah, I noticed the township and several others were in that case, so obviously some of this is historical that you're bringing to the table as
Yes.
part of that.
Trying to, since we had extra
Application.
money, trying to get them up where we think they should be.
Oh, I've been there. I mean, I eat my way around the food court. I mean, I'm not gonna lie about that. It's one of my
What
favorite
event is
events.
this?
Huh?
What event is
The
this?
Columbia International Festival. I probably burned through 3 or 4 rolls of tickets, but, the only other question I had too is because I've been to the event several times is, the Black Pages International event. Could you shed some light on that? I do think it's a very signature event in our community. It does bring a lot of out-of-town people here. Almost, to be honest, the majority of the people I met weren't from here.
That one, well, you can see we increased them from anything we've given them in the past. I believe council has added to that number. I don't think the council add-on shows in those previous year amounts. So we did feel like we wanted to increase them. We just didn't feel like we could take them up to the 50,000.
That was one of the issues, excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. That was one of the questions, two concerns. I want to talk a little bit about, Black Pages International. And why was there not any funding for Feed the City LLC?
Okay, that was a problematic application because the events were small dinners. They were going to do dinners in homes with private chefs and a dinner in the tunnel that was going to be, I think, $75 a person. And they weren't events that were going to be open to Columbia. Now, then they were going to turn around, and I'm not sure who mentioned this earlier, but they were using the proceeds to then turn around and donate money to Harvest Hope. And so it was gathering money to then turn around and donate money. Right, yeah, well, there are no restaurants involved. It was all private events. And it was a pretty broad outreach, but we weren't really seeing that it was going to happen.
I sort of want to piggyback on what the mayor, the mayor, of course, brought up the subject of Black Pages International. Why was there not the full amount?
If I remember correctly, we were happy to be able to give them more than we had the last 3-4 years. So we felt like an increase was giving them what they really needed. Yeah, because in our evaluation of the application and the interview, we felt like 40 was appropriate.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the justification when you've got a number of persons coming in to the city for this event, that like any other organizations, they are funded fully and Black Pages brings in an inordinate number of persons into our city, and yet we did not fund them fully.
Yeah, let me pull up their application.
And I'll just,
And I'm sure that Black Pages International is appreciative for that, but I think at some point we need to make sure that those organizations that are contributing to the lifeblood of our city in terms of being a revenue generator for tourism and for folk coming in, that we not cut them, but we give them more.
Well, and we thought we were giving them more, giving them 40 rather than
They got
30.
10,000 more than last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let me just add, yeah, you got 10,000 more than you did last year. But we just gave 5 points an additional $200,000.
Move that up to the 50 today.
That's it.
We ain't got to where we giving 5 points, 200,000 yet.
Well, if we look
From
at.
a percentage
if we
perspective,
look
the
at-
increase for the Black pages is more than what we're talking about doing for 5 Points right now. Isn't that correct?
Well, this,
Well, it just seems to, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add, though, every single year, you all make an allotment, and then Black Pages comes to city council, and city council increases it. It seems like we would get to the point where you all just make the allotment so that they don't have to come back to us. And so I would recommend that to the council members that we just put it at 50, because they're gonna come back. They're gonna come. And that's just more time that we have to make that discussion. So, I mean, every year that I've watched, Black Pages comes back. And it's not as if we don't, well, not we, I wasn't on council then, but every year, council approved the additional money. That's the only thing I would note.
So let me ask you, where, Terry, am I missing, Missy, am I missing where the carry forward funds are?
It's not showing in
Okay.
this.
So how do you have?
Bottom of page 21.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not showing in this little handout that I have that came with your
On the bottom of
agenda items.
21, right here on this page, if you look at the bottom, it has 484, 531 is what's left over.
Okay, so then
Were you talking about the
So,
organization specific?
yeah, organization specific. Divine Street merchants have a $8,000 carry forward, correct?
21.
Right, and that is not really subject to the committee's allocations, it's just what was available that they requested for carry forward, so it's on there for information.
Okay, wonderful.
It's their allocation from the prior year that they had not spent.
Okay, completely understood. So they asked for 100, and this is all for marketing initiatives. Divine Street, I would view as a growing corridor, and I'd like to see that bump to meet in the middle at 80,000.
Which one?
The Divine Street Association. So that would be my request,
That's
Mr. Mayor.
$20,000.
Correct, from 60 to 80, with their 8,000 carry forward on top of that 80.
I will
Similarly,
tell
Mr.
you
Mayor,
that in the activities, we didn't see a lot of change in what they were doing in Divine Street from previous.
Wonderful.
Just a-
Well, you know, every little bit helps, put it in a litter pickup program. You know, Rosewood Merchants have done a good job of that as well, so implementing something like that with the Divine Street Association, I think would be great.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, similarly, I'd like to, instead of having Black Pages to come back to us a second time, that we up that to $50,000.
So you want to add 10,
I mean, 10, 10, yes.
keeping a tally.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I have another
It's gonna be tough to
question.
catch up to Howard's tally, though, right?
I know, right?
Yeah, I can't catch up with that.
Howard already spent
Yeah.
the
He took 30%
unallocated
of the-
portion already.
So Workshop Theater of South Carolina, we're jumping from 3,900 to 20,000. And then I noticed that both Trustus and Workshop didn't receive anything in 21, 22. Would love to just get more insight as to what you guys are thinking there.
Okay, Workshop has done a tremendous change over the years. From when we hardly funded them at all because they were, to put this crudely, they seem to be in a really downward slump. Now they've coordinated with Columbia College, and they're really coming back to where they used to be. So we thought we're now funding them where we would have when they were whole. And then as far as Trustus, we gave them what they asked for, and
Number 56 and 56 and 58.
Town Theater. We, if you look back now, the 40,000 that they got previously was not when the committee was working. You'll see that traditionally the committee had given them about 15,000 a year. So 30,000 is about double what we used to give them. They're a solid program. We don't see that they're growing, quadruply, but they do a nice job.
Again, I would just reiterate what I said earlier about, again, I think having a surplus is a good thing. We do not have to force ourselves to give all this money away. Having money left over to beautify these entertainment areas, I think is critical. I think we had that discussion in one of our committee meetings here in the last month or so. And so again, I think part of what we should really be looking at is how we can start taking some of these funds and the extra funds this year and putting them into our beautification budget, especially in these entertainment districts.
How much did we spend, Mayor?
Right at 200K. If you got 115 to the Guild to bring them back up, 55 to 5 points until they apply and provide other, and then you had 20 to Divine Street and 10 to Black Pages. That's 200.
Then you also had 25 to classical ballet.
Well, I was going to mention is this was a specific request for an individual that we don't know is there, so I think we hold it over until we know that's.
Yeah, I think it was for the Brooklyn's assistant, but we were told the Brooklyn hasn't accepted the
So I
the
think
full position.
that still leaves $284,000 in the account. So I would say that, we hold off on the classic 25 until we verified that. I think you hold off on the additional that you mentioned, 5 points until they can provide, and they can always apply to the difference. We're adding the 20 to Divine, 10 to Black Pages, and then that gives the Guild the additional and 5 points of additional. Anybody else have any at this stage? And then I would suggest that we hold 10% of what's left to put towards a class. We may not need that much, but if we can offer workshops to increase investment in the arts and entertainment and also help some of the smaller entities learn how to navigate the system to raise more money, I think that's well money spent.
I just check, I mean, you're spot on that, and I think one of the things that we can do in those classes is help them identify, it's not necessarily the city, but the consultant that we bring in. I think where I've seen lots of boards struggle is how do you find the names out, and I just think that's an absolute champion of an idea, Mr. Mayor.
Y'all brought it up, and it makes a lot of sense, and we're seeing more and more nonprofits and some folks reaching out. As you know, there's hundreds of private foundations in South Carolina that fund all types of things, but it's just like when people are applying for scholarships and stuff. I don't care if it's a $200 scholarship or $2,000; they all add up. So what I think whatever we could do to help these organizations, we should. So I think if we're good with that, then we have a path forward with the committee recommendations. Do we have a consensus on that?
The 200,000 total that we talked about.
Yep.
Okay.
And then taking 10% of that would leave us 284. So if we put 28,000 in a reserve towards a workshop, we may not need it. We may can release it, but at least we know we put some money away.
But it gives us some wiggle room.
Yes, sir. We still have money on the table. Yes, sir. $260,000 plus or minus some coins there.
Line items?
We're getting there, Howard. Slow down. I know you like to spend money, but we got.
I just wanted to say, I thought you did a great job on the line items, and I don't have any suggestions.
Any more suggestions?
Not yet. We haven't begun the discussion.
Yes, and thanks again to the committee for their time. It was several days of long days with meetings and hearing from all the applicants. So thanks again to the committee for their work.
And hopefully, as we continue to move forward and fund the different events, that we'll continue to get more hospitality money generated. I mean, our goal is really to lift those overnight guests and more people spend the night eating dinner, eating out, so that we can really grow that 15 million visitors that we have. And it's pretty exciting what the potential we have here. And I really appreciate y'all's time. Thank you. With that, we are going to the line item budget.
So next is the line item agencies, which you have also in your packet, their amount of their request. And up on your screen, 1, 2,
Yeah, do you want to,
6,
Howard?
okay, go ahead.
I'm good with all the line item allocations.
so just out of curiosity, there's nowhere on here what the budgeted amount is, there's just requested amounts.
So the budget amount is really going to depend on a couple things. City council, so once the allocated funds for the committee and for debt service and for the transfer,
So it's
that left you a budget of
3.5.
3.5. Now, out of that, though, I would say that's coming for your line item agencies. There's also some specific initiatives requested by city council that are up for still consideration.
We're not spending it
And if
all,
you
I'm
let-
gonna tell you that
right.
right now.
And then some other line items, so, or a few other topics. So,
'Cause there's several questions in here. I know I have, and I think council does too, but what the remaining is the 3.5, 38, 154. Obviously, we want to have reserve of that.
It's roughly 400,000 if
Where-
you funded this as listed remaining.
I'm reading that, out of the 3.5, you did this, you wouldn't have but 500,000.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But we're not, we hadn't allocated this yet, so right now we got 3.5 is our budget.
only thing
We
we've
ought to
provided
go
on the
ahead and
line.
hold, go ahead and we need to hold some of that back, but I'd like everybody to have an opportunity to talk about the existing, and then we can decide on an allocation of that to hold back for these other.
Right, there's some council
opportunities.
initiatives,
Yes, sir.
Councilman
Yes, ma'am.
Brennan.
Right,
has an
right. So, and
initiative.
to speak to that, Mr. Mayor, the $400,000 that I requested be held back, that is being calculated in the to be allocated number.
That's part of the, it's include, so you have 3.5 to be allocated.
To be allocated, wonderful. So, looking at that, I would, this line item, I would look to see One Columbia approved at their traditional amount of the 83,000, as we keep in mind moving forward with the potential of a use of that $400,000 for arts and culture, whatever form that we agree on with the arts community and city council. That 400 came out, topic came up, I've discussed it with several of you from the Arts and Historic Subcommittee about a year ago. So moving that forward.
Missy's got it set aside.
She does have it set aside, as she just said.
It would be
Well,
part
not
of the
specifically.
Right.
It's
it'd be
in
part
that
of the
number.
3.5.
Everyone said, where is it set aside?
It's not set
It's
aside.
It's not, it's
It's
You
in
would
that,
need to
I'm
find
sorry,
the
it's in that
400,000.
total.
right,
What total?
3.5.
3.5.
pending
It would
city
have to
council,
come
for
out of
city
that.
council's consideration, right. It's been requested.
Been requested.
What else has been added in there?
Pardon?
Anything else?
The only other would be the line item agencies, as y'all are discussing, and then there's another 116 that's for some allocations that are for the Parks and Recreation Foundation, the contract that we have with River Alliance, and a contract for Leisure Fund.
But this money would also support some of the other initiatives that we've talked about around beautification and gateways and things like that, right?
Which,
Some of the council priorities we talked about at the retreat, we would
Those
have
are-
to use these?
no,
Don't-
they would not come from these funds, those
I
were.
mean, you could, we're happy, I mean, that goes more towards, I think, what y'all were talking about earlier, but again, that's the purpose of what I was saying earlier, that if you want to consider things like that with HTAX, but we also are going to be bringing you fund balance and.
Got it, okay.
In additional work sessions, but yes, ma'am, I think that's a wonderful opportunity to consider beautification efforts in the entertainment districts.
Reverend McDowell?
Wait, I had one more thing.
Well, we were going around the room.
Oh.
You're good?
Oh, you cut. I was like, what? Okay.
Ms. Herbert?
I'm fine. I've
done?
added up all of the potential requests, and it stays within budget, so.
Mr. Brennan?
I'm good. I think I hopped in line earlier. Thank you.
Dr. Bustles?
I'd just like to understand a little bit more about the capital campaign. Is it something that we're bound by? Because that would be a $1.1 million investment for the Columbia Museum of Art.
Committed to
We committed.
that money over a period of 5 years. back in 2000, yeah,
And this is the last year.
because it's the left of what's
Mhm.
left.
It's year
We didn't
5
pay
and
out.
5.
Did you have anything else, Dr. Bustles?
Not right now.
Mr. Taylor?
Why, just, do we have a reason why we're going from 700 to 800,000 on the Museum of Art? Top of the first one, I'm gonna go down the whole list. I mean, on the Museum of Art.
It's a request, that's what that is.
I mean, but
Everything here is a request.
I understand that. That's what I say. They asked for an extra 100,000, do we know what it's for?
For additional marketing and promotions.
But how is that different than the capital campaign?
Are we assuming that, or do we say this is what we're asking the extra $100,000 for?
It would be in part of their applications. I don't have their application in front of me, but I can pull their applications.
And then, like I said, the 300, this is the last payment on the 300.
Right, that was a prior commitment from,
Okay. Music festivals went up 5. Adventure, again, why are we going up 275,000 from last year?
most of these requests are getting back to their allocations from
Look,
exactly,
just
but it's going
because
back
we
to.
used to
right.
pay something doesn't mean that we, you gotta, you should have to justify it again.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the way it is in my house. So do we know what we're getting for the extra 275?
We can pull their
Okay,
applications and
okay,
determine
then I'm-
more, but it's for additional marketing. This is,
Okay.
for line item agencies, there are some additional operating costs that they're allowed to fund for, which is why they are these
I
line item
understand,
agencies.
but I'm saying we
Could we
ought to
pull
be-
those
we ought to be-
applications?
we ought to be looking at what the increase is for. Same thing on the Historic Columbia Foundation, on the, going from 175 to 200. I'm not sure, I see Ms. Waits is here. I'm just not sure what my story matters. You can tell me later. And then my question on the Heritage Tourism Program with Historic, do we use any of that money for maintenance CapEx? It's all operating money? Just out of curiosity, where's the maintenance CapEx money come from? Yeah. Okay, you. Okay, but okay, so you're including,
Here's the,
I got it. One Columbia, Will, that's what you were dealing with?
Will recommended going back to the allotment in 21, 22 is what I heard him say.
Okay. I agree with you on that. And then the famously hot New Year.
It's not on here.
Oh, it's on, I have my sheet from, I guess, from earlier.
I mean, it's on
Not a
here, but
comment.
it doesn't get an allocation.
So no money on that. All right, good. We're not doing
It's on here.
anything at all that we need to budget
They
anything
don't
for
get
there?
an allocation.
I mean, I think we should budget something for fireworks and something else, even though I know.
That's what I say.
Fireworks.
Well, that's my question. Do we want to plug in
Yeah, I've
50 or
talked to,
$75,000 there
I
for
think we
a
plug in
fireworks
50.
display?
I would plug in
Okay.
50.
All right.
Yeah, no. We're
Yeah, I
gonna
was
do a
gonna-
New Year's.
Mr. Mayor, I was going to, I'm sorry.
I mean, as long as
I think we need to budget it.
and I think something lighter and smaller that's nicer, but gives families some place to go watch something on New Year's Eve is something that's important for us as a city. So I mean, I would say we put a $50,000 placeholder for New Year's on that.
I think so too.
Agree with me?
I think instead of not doing anything, we do something.
That's what,
We do something.
does a $50,000 placeholder for something on New Year's work for everybody?
Would $50,000 be sufficient enough, Mr. Mayor?
There's some private entities who have reached out, that we're just having some conversations. So yes, I do think it would be.
before, I still want to understand the same way that the hospitality chair so nicely explained what this additional money would be used for. Like, I feel like I'm going in blind. We have no idea what these increases are, except for that it was done in the past. So I need more information.
That's what I say, then when we get to the council meeting, we may just take them back to the other number, if we don't have any additional information.
Well, I mean, I think we have to discuss here we need to hold back some of this 3.5 for these other There's 116 that Ms. Kaufman brought forth. I know Mr. Brennan has a $400,000 look-see. I mean, there's a lot of discussion yet for us to have how we break that up. I think we do need to hold back a significant amount of this money. You know, I do need Ms. Kaufman to give me a little bit deeper dive on Adventure, because we made a deal with Adventure several years ago on this allocation, and I want to know what's changed.
Can I ask you another question about Adventure while we're doing? I noticed in one of the reports recently that we do all the landscape maintenance for Adventure. I mean, I imagine that's a fairly significant contribution that I wonder if we're getting credit for us.
We own the building too.
That's part of why these groups are line item agencies, is because of the fiduciary responsibility that the city has with some of the organizations or with some of the facilities. Adventure being one of them, the city owns the facility. So part of their operating cost is what is funded through H-Tax. Their H-Tax allocation.
Yeah, we own the building, but there's some background on some things that we worked out with the board several years ago, and that's why a $275,000 increase is hard for me at this point without having a deeper discussion.
And the sheer fact that we own the building, we don't pay the light bill either. I mean, you know, our doing the landscape work is a contribution to what they do. I'm just curious. I bet you our.
I'm not familiar that, you're saying that our staff does their facility operations?
We do handle, I'm not gonna speak to the landscaping and how much, but there are several in-kind,
That's
for
right.
lack of better
Right.
words, items that we handle in addition to when I don't remember if it was the boiler. I mean, there've been repairs and things of that nature that we've taken on
No,
over
and I
the years.
understand that, and I have no quarrel with the fact, but we don't get dollar credit.
Yes, sir.
For what
I
that
understand.
cost us when it comes to these contributions, is all I'm saying. So basic bottom line, if we, you know, just another way to look at it would be to say, if we did $300,000 in cash plus our in-kind, it could be as much as a $400,000 or more contribution this past year. I just, again, no problem with it, just need to make sure we get credit for it.
Do you want to change the number for the Adventure from off of that 575?
Well, we're taking an 83 away right now because we're from One Columbia.
And the answer.
And I think we need to have a deeper discussion about that, because nobody has reached out to council at all with any of the changes, update information, or anything. And so, you know, I do think that's something that we need to have at some point on our agenda.
Well, what I was going to suggest, Mr. Mayor, is we defer these beyond, you know, to the next meeting.
Which would be Tuesday.
No, yeah, at least divert till we get the information that we're asking on why the spreads are up. I don't think we need to vote on it this afternoon.
I think we're gonna have, out of the 3.5, I think we're gonna have to hold back $600,000. So we would be at 2.9 to put towards these requests.
What is the 600 for?
Well, we've got requests of 116 plus possibly 400 and a little leeway in there. Don't know that we're all using that, but that's,
Well, by my math, we're at 3.5 million, and it's only about 30,000 for Famously Hot New Year, unless we reduce some.
And I think we're talking about reducing, right?
yeah. Oh, I think we're gonna have to reduce it some. The question is, but we don't have enough information here to be able to make that decision. And I think understanding what the increases are in each category will help us make that decision. You know, I mean, and I think that's important for us to have the information
Yeah.
that we can do that.
I would have liked to have more insight besides just marketing as to what these increases are for. So I know like Historic Columbia sent a breakdown of their budget and what they'd use the $700,000 for. And it's just helpful to understand, you know, where that money would be going towards. And it might be we keep it the same, but I don't want to go in blind and just hear marketing and then approve it.
I would recommend, because one thing with nonprofits is they need their funds to operate, and we're already into the first year of the fiscal year. I would recommend that we, at the very least, consider funding them at the prior year funding, since the only issue that we have right now is the excess.
Fine with that.
I accept that.
Totally fine with that.
And then we just discuss the rest, and then we can notify each one of them on what additional funding will be there.
But we should assume that the year 5 payment.
Yeah,
For the museum art.
that's included, yeah.
That's 2.26 plus the 3, so that's 2.516, so 388. And then we can discuss the balance next week.
Sorry, so you all are going to go ahead and approve the FY 21-22 approved number for Adventure, the Museum of Art? Were those the two in question?
Well, the other one was the added 300. Let's go ahead and clean up our obligation for
Right.
a capital campaign that we committed year 5 or 4 and 5 of 5.
I'm new to this. I have a lot of questions. So the Music Festival and Philharmonic, what is our fiduciary agreement with those groups?
So and Mr. Whitehead may want to come speak on that one, but the Music Festival Foundation it comes back to an old relationship or an old, I don't know if it's an act or consideration that was funded at that point in time. The Philharmonic was added by a council member and approved by council a couple of years ago. There's not a fiduciary responsibility.
The Columbia Music Festival is more than a judiciary thing, it's a state law. That they have a state law saying that the city of Columbia will fund the Columbia Music Festival, so we have some responsibility according to state law. They also act as fiduciary for several.
Yeah, some of the other groups.
Rodeo boards.
No, I just think it's important for the public and for us new folks to understand, you know, because there's a lot of other groups that may do similar things but have to go through the regular H-tax process. So I want it to be clear to the public as to why these groups are in the line item. And the Philharmonic was just a specific kind of council ask to add that on as a line item?
Well, they all want to be line item. That's the thing that you'll hear.
Sure, but
repeatedly.
what?
They all want to be line items, but line item doesn't really do you any big thing. You still get looked at just like if you were not a line item. The only thing the line item does is let us take care of our fiduciary responsibility as the council for those agencies that we had a special relationship with.
And all applicants are still subject, even the city, are still subject to eligible activities according to what is specified in state
All
law.
of them have the same laws applied to them.
So the Philharmonic would be getting actually a little bit more.
The money differently. I mean, the line items have to meet the same responsibilities as the non-line item.
They still have to follow the same rules.
Sure,
as
but it's
applicants.
still the outward impression that there is something about this organization that is special, that makes them a line item. And I want to be very transparent as to why and how we decide something is a line item. And when you see something like the Philharmonic and you have 3 ballets as well and all of these other shows that are going through a regular process, I think it's fair to have questions asked as to by what criteria did they get to be a line item?
Well,
Hold them out at this point until next week for further information.
I'm fine with, I mean, they would actually be funded $7,500 more than what they're asking. They're actually asking for less this time around.
That was Howard's fireworks money that he gave them.
let me ask you a question.
But I would like for us to discuss, you know, being fair and being equitable in terms of how we fund certain shows and organizations and revisit whether or not that should be a line item and whether they should go through the regular process.
The only one that we don't have fiduciary responsibility for is the Philharmonic.
That's what I'm talking about, the Philharmonic.
So
One Columbia, we don't. I mean, that's not, that's an organization that is
We don't have
not,
contracts with. the
we don't
rest
have
of
any
the
contracts with
That's
those.
correct.
We do have one.
We don't have
Fiduciary responsibility
on
on the Columbia Museum of
We
We
do.
don't, we own the building.
But you gotta be careful using the term fiduciary responsibility. That's the word.
I want
And
to
I-
make sure, just for clarity purposes, you're asking Dr. Bustles the question, you're not questioning the funding. What are you?
I'm just questioning what makes something a line item versus having to go through the regular
it's not the-
process.
So it's not the funding that's.
It's the process that I have concerns about.
All right. Has there been conversation with hospitality relative to well, we talked about the ballet, about the Philharmonic?
No, sir, I just asked Missy as to why it's been added, and it sounds like it was a request by a council prior to me being on council.
Yeah, Missy, I was gonna ask.
I'm right here.
I was gonna ask, historically, if we looked at the Philharmonic and the funding process, that has not changed, has it?
They were added in 2014 as a line item agency. Prior to, they went through the application process like everyone else.
And I wanted to provide based off this conversation about fiduciary responsibilities, the commitment at Adventure has entailed us, and then this is coming from Kelvin, who knows, our general services director, and I asked him on average what we've spent, so he'll probably get that to us, but we pay for the major HVAC replacements, roof repairs, replacement, and any structural issues with the building. This varies from year to year. We do not pay for landscaping. Parks and Rec does do the landscaping at Canal Park and Coble Plaza, but I don't think they necessarily do the whole building. But those are the things that we have done, and we can put a dollar amount to that for y'all if you need us
I think we
to.
should do that between now and next meeting.
Okay, we'll do that. And I would say they have new leadership, so I don't know if the new I think he may have been there. I don't think he's been there 3 weeks, 2 weeks, yeah.
So to corral us back, we are going to last year's allocations, along with the 300,000 to finish off the capital campaign, which would be $2.5,16385. And then the balance we will discuss and go through and get some more information and render a decision possibly next Tuesday's meeting. Are we all accord on that process? Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so that concludes then the hospitality tax discussions for now, so we'll move on. The next one is for the state accommodations tax. So state accommodations tax, the total budget for state accommodations is 2.6 million. We are allocated from state accommodations tax is what's specified according to state law, and that is the 25,000 that goes to the general fund, as specified by state law. We also have a 5% that's called a general purpose allocation. That's 131,000. That is right now dedicated for, city council did agree for allocation of $40,000 towards the community promotion grant process. That is a discussion we will bring back to you in August discussions for determination of a grant program. Also in that group is what you have funded the other part of One Columbia's contract for. So they're not listed there in this, waiting for determination for city council in terms of what and how you would fund the One Columbia contract. It was split between 50% general fund, 50% hospitality tax, 50% accommodation, state accommodations tax. So that's where we funded, how we
Where
funded.
is that contract?
We don't have a contract at this point pending the allocation. We have a scope of, we can get the scope of services that would be proposed.
We're gonna need that before we consider anything.
Okay.
At this point. On the One Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely.
So remaining for allocation is 2.5 million. That's the balance, as you also are aware. State accommodations tax is also divvied up by 30% is for allocation for a tourism-related promotions and marketing, granted towards, or not granted towards, but by state law is recommended for dedicated by a tourism or civic organization. And then also the other 65% is for tourism-related activities. Historically, City Council has allocated those funds to two groups, Convention and Visitors Bureau or Experience Columbia, and Lake Murray Tourism.
Mr. Duval.
Mr. Mayor, going back a number of years, and I don't remember exactly when. Missy, do you know when we started doing 85-15?
It would have been at least 15 years.
Going back 15 years.
Not long after the H-tax funds were allocated, or were started.
We started the allocation at 85-15. One of the major reasons I think that the council did that was because these funds have to be reported to the Tourism Oversight Committee at the Department of Revenue, TURC. And these two agencies were already pre-qualified, so to speak, going through the review process. And these are the two agencies that the accommodation tax means, that they mean more to the accommodation tax by bringing in people to sleep in the beds. So I think we should stay with the allocation as recommended by the committee, which is the 85-15 that we have done before.
Mr. Mayor, can I
Yes.
maybe address that? Let me preface by what I'm getting ready to say, but I have no quarrel at all with any of the entities' operating budgets that have received our accommodations tax. In your package, I wanted you to see, we are the only entity that takes 100% of our state tax and spends it and puts it into two deals. And I think what we've got to do, frankly, after 14 years, is look and say, what's the city of Columbia's fair share? And I want to make sure we're on the right side of being fair. So if you look at, you'll see this. It just shows you what other municipalities and other government entities in the Midlands are able to spend their accommodations tax on.
What have you got?
You gave this to everybody. It's this page right here. Isn't that right one, Missy?
So it's a separate document.
See behind it. And all I'm saying is, as we look at, as we look at our park system, in particular Finley Park downtown, I would tell you parks are something that we can spend A-tax money on according to the guidelines from the state. I think one of the things we have to look at as we go forward is make sure we pay our fair share, but we retain some of our monies to take care of the things that other entities in the Midlands are able to use to take care of theirs. What do you?
I don't think this is it.
If you look at, it's just,
Figure out which document you're on.
Figure out which document.
well, I mean, here, look, the second page. You see that second page there? Well, Missy put these together for me. I don't.
92, page 92.
Information from other jurisdictions.
Yeah, these are informations from other jurisdictions in the Midlands, just so you can see what other entities, how they divide up their A-tax. I mean, you've got Lexington County, you've got the town of Lexington, you've got West Columbia. And I just want you to see that we're the only people that do this. And again, the question today is, I'm not so sure what our fair amount is, so I mean, I'm not advocating anything like that, but I do think that that us carrying the load for everybody else, where they're able to take parts of their A-tax to fix up their parks, their streets, and you can see the other uses, I'm not sure it's equitable to the citizens of Columbia. And what I'd like to see us look at doing as our local A-tax becomes available is, how do we capture anything outside of our fair share and dedicate it to a city parks renewal and maintenance account. Again, starting with Finley Park and downtown Columbia. I mean, I just don't think it's equitable for other entities to be able to use theirs for other purposes, while we ask the citizens of Columbia to put 100% of theirs in just two entities.
Still, let me ask you and I have talked how and this is, of course, is for another conversation.
Sure.
Because when we start talking about perhaps a garnishing of those funds for a Finley Park, over a period of time, and I'm sure we could crush those numbers and get a better time in terms of the parameter of
Sure.
time. But it seems to me that over a period of time, you could garnish an excessive amount of money to go towards a Finley Park.
Yes, sir. I think between the combination of, again, what's the fair portion of the A tax? And I don't want to put anybody in a bad place this year, but as the local A tax becomes available, I think, Mr. McDowell, where you're asking, I mean, we could see somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.5 to $4.5 million become available annually for us to maintain and improve our parks and beautify our city and town.
And could very well, I'm sorry, Howard.
Go ahead.
And could very well be some residual work on other places.
Absolutely, but I think to make this thing where everybody understands this is not about special interest, for the city it's about making our city a better place, a more beautiful place. And again, I think starting with how we do downtown Columbia and the Finley Park project would be the first place that we should reserve a significant portion of these monies and the new monies that are going to become available to rebuild and make that park the crown jewel of downtown like it was intended to be to begin with.
You're, just so everybody's on the same, because we're talking about you're talking about reserving a possible portion of the A tax and tourism and other taxes, not just all A tax.
I'm talking about reserving, creating taking anything above what our fair share is, whatever we determine our fair share to be on state A tax. Same thing on the local A tax. There's a backstop that's probably going to be needed for the convention center. A portion of that.
Do we have the local A tax?
That's the tourism development.
This one is state, what we're talking about now is state. We do have tourism, which is the local
I
accommodations.
just want to make
which
sure
we'll
that
talk about
we're
next.
all, because they have different names. I don't want anybody to be confused about what.
Well, and that's to say, for lack of a better description, what we have historically called a tourism development fee is a local A tax. And again, I mean, we should, as a city, backstop a portion of the loss on the convention center, but I'm not so sure it's our responsibility to backstop all of the thing. And again, if it's $4 million on the local A tax, you can see very quickly, if we were to backstop half of the convention center deficit, that knocks it down to 2.9 million available just annually on the local A tax. So it gives us the ability to not do 30-year bonds or even 15-year bonds for maintenance projects, but to fund them in a much shorter order, which I think is a financial excellent move for the city. And I think it's fair for our citizens.
Well, you also got to look at what we will be giving up if we take some of this money away from the agencies that are bringing people into town. And certainly the two that we give the money to now are the two agencies that are using that money to do publicity, to bring people to the Midlands.
Mr. Duvall, I said I have no quarrel with their budget. Okay? I mean, what I do have a quarrel with is, why are we the ones that fund it, that take all of ours when nobody else does? I mean, these other entities should be compelled to have to make contributions to these entities too.
Well, they do make contributions.
Not at the level we do, sir, especially on the participation level.
No, I think I have seen budgets that show that the other entities in the Midlands contribute to Lake Murray, the other entities contribute to Experience Columbia.
Sure, there are some, but my question is, what's the fair amounts, and what about the ones that don't? I mean, I have no quarrel with anybody's budget, but I would suggest that one of the things that I saw, frankly, like I say, on the convention center, the West Columbias, the Casey's, they don't contribute. I'm not so sure about the Lake Murray one, but I do think our contribution to there on the government contributions is, I don't want to guess on a percentage, but I think it's north of 50% of what they receive from it's about 65% of what the budget showed they received from local governments.
I don't think that is a true figure.
I think
So,
the ask for this year was $400 and something thousand out of a $600 and something thousand budgeted local ask, is what I saw on it. Maybe I'm wrong.
And I think the issue, Mr. Duvall, is not so much maybe what the other ones, the percentage of what they do or don't do for the two groups. I think we were trying to clarify, and what we were asked to clarify as staff, is this, this history of the city council doing it to the exclusion of anybody else. So whatever percentages it is that other entities are doing, I don't know that they're doing it to the exclusion of any other groups or any other purposes or any other needs. And so I think that is what we were asked to do. I mean, what y'all decide to do is what you decide to do, but there's nothing binding you to do it the way it has been being done.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
But
that's all.
you look at the local option sales tax, there's nothing binding us from using the $8 million that we get in the 29% fund that goes straight to the city for using it for Finley Park or for whatever else, tax reduction.
But, sir, that's
But
not
we-
what we're
we
talking
make the
about
decision.
here. Howard, you just changed the subject.
No, I'm saying that, you're saying that we should change the way we do things with the accommodation tax, but we make decisions on the local option sales tax the same way. And we
No,
have
no, sir.
decided to use it all.
What I'm suggesting,
For tax
what
reduction.
I'm suggesting is what we're doing today is not fair to the people of Columbia. That
I
we're,
would
that we're not
suggest-
taking I'm just telling, other entities are able to take their funds, tourism funds, and improve their city with it, outside of just making contributions to two things. I think, candidly, I think we carry a bigger load than of what our fair deal is.
Well, the majority of this money goes to the convention center, and I think it is our responsibility to put the 85% money into the convention center. It brings people
Well,
in.
we're one of three entities that are responsible for it. And we're at 65% of the money that goes in there. I'm not saying that we don't need to, but why wouldn't we, just for argument's sake here for a minute, why wouldn't we keep $500,000 out of that budget to use to do other things that improve and help other entities in this community? Because we're taking the load for the majority of these other folks, and some of it's got to be equitable spent. We always want to be the player, but we can't fund everything. And if you look throughout our budgets, we are funding everything. This is a discussion about how we move forward. We may all decide that we may not make a change in 2022, but moving forward, we're going to change. We don't know that. That's why we're having this
And
discussion.
let me just give you an example real quick. I had the floor and he interrupted
I
me.
know, but
so-
my hand has been up for a really long.
No, and just an example would
I have
be,
that
hands don't
privilege.
work, you just have to.
I didn't complain. No, an example would be, for example,
I know,
and I don't think I
start
would ever
interrupting.
ask anybody to
No, it's
use
not.
general fund dollars for these tourism expenses. But let's just say, for example, one of the things that I heard is it's our responsibility because we collect this much A tax. Well, another local entity here may not collect as much A tax as we do, but they collect property tax on all of all the hotels here, and we provide all the services. So why wouldn't they fund a bigger share of their A tax out of maybe their H tax money, which they may have a surplus on? I mean, again, I will make it clear, I'm not arguing about budgets. I'm just saying, okay, what's the equitable, fair piece for the citizens of Columbia to carry? And I think we've got an opportunity here that we should take a look. Is it right, especially as we're coming out of this, the bonds on the convention center, as do we begin to take some of our tourism money to improve the other things that can draw people into Columbia?
Ms. Herbert, then
Thank
you
you.
want to say something, Mr. Brown? Okay.
I was going to make the recommendation that we send this issue to the Economic and Community Development Committee. I do believe, again, with certain businesses, I don't like to drop the hammer in the middle of their fiscal year, but this gives us 6 months to come up with a plan or even closer. I think we need to do it closer, but I mean, you want to give the organizations at least 6 months lead time. And I'm thinking that you would really enjoy the referral.
Well, and let me say this. I made it, I think I said it earlier. I mean, I have no desire to put anybody that receives these monies in a bad way this year. I think it's it's a transitional thing for us to take a look at. Hopefully, we're coming out of this COVID now, and I know. and I'm getting ready. Here's the second one, and we don't get into a
You
recession.
might have monkeypox.
Yeah, so everything goes up. So I don't want to put anybody in a bad way, but I do think and I would, you know, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I'd be willing to move these forward at a certain level.
Let's hear from everybody
Okay.
else, and then we can
Sure.
talk about how we move forward. I think we need to make sure everybody's heard.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, for whoever provided the accommodations tax breakdowns from the other counties and municipalities, this is very interesting stuff. To understand that we can spend our accommodations taxes on beautification of our parks and recreational facilities. I tell you, you go, soccer season's right around the corner, Mr. Mayor, and what do we hear come YMCA soccer season at Owens Field? And we've been digging and digging, looking for turf management, new facility over there. I have fallen on the same rocks at Owens Field playing soccer as my 3-year-old son's about to do this. So it's eye-opening to know that there is a path forward for upgrading, because, you know, we scramble, we claw for capital improvement budgets. A lot of times we rely on the state for the PARD program when it comes to these. So very, very interested to see a new path emerge with these accommodation taxes. So I just wanted to say thank you for providing, I guess, Mr. Taylor, that was you or Missy, I'm not sure, a snapshot of what other local governments are spending their accommodation tax on.
I would agree with Ms. Herbert that with it being basically almost August at this point, I agree with Councilman Taylor that this is something we need to revisit, and I would be supportive of us not allocating the full amount next year, and looking at some of our priorities and using it towards beautification and some of the other things that we're not able to fund. But that perhaps we move forward this year with the full disclosure on the record that this is likely to change for these two organizations next year, and that they should prepare accordingly so that there's no surprises when we come back to this discussion in a year.
So the question becomes then, is what's the right amount to fund? Out of what we have is 2.503.
Well, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Herbert's recommendation was funded at the, I guess, some level at the recommended, is that correct? Okay, and then bring it back for a process moving forward?
So if you take it at the recommended, I just want everybody to be clear about what you're talking about. You're talking about that leaves zero in that account. That account is gone.
Why not the same approach as we did with H-Tax, the approved numbers from last year, throw it to Economic Development Subcommittee for a summary of who pays in through the various accommodations?
If I could add on.
So let's do quick math here. I don't have my signs. I don't know. I can do it in my head.
One.
Well, they asked, let's just.
They don't ask, they just get a split, so you gotta
What do
take.
you mean they don't? It's a requested amount.
Missy, what were you gonna?
So I would say some of these groups may not actually be eligible for these funds.
I'm not
ATAX
talking
funds,
about all the groups. I'm talking about the two main groups here that we have traditionally
Right.
linked. So if it was 2 years ago, because of where we were, last year it was 214. The request was 418, excuse me. So why don't we transition, take a median between the two numbers?
Wait, so I have a question. When they request, do they request a dollar amount, or do they request the percentage of the ATAX? And that's why we're seeing a fluctuation, because there's more ATAX.
Zero.
let me add a few more pieces of information that might be helpful here too. We do, so you do allocate accommodations tax completely because of the way state law works with these funds. They're very specific. The committee, there is an actual state committee called Turk, which is the Tourism Expenditure something other committee. They review these applications to, or review the expenditures of this committee as well. So there are a few more hoops in that piece. So typically these funds are allocated 100%. In addition to what's requested here, when we end up having surplus in the year, those funds also are allocated to the two groups in the same equal amount. The column, there is a column that shows how much was requested. So Lake Murray requested $418,000. The Commission Visitors Bureau, Experience Columbia requested 2.5. The committee didn't have that much to spend, so they allocated the available amount by the 15.85%. And that's just the budget, that's the,
100% of that budget.
that's based on the budget, projected budget for this year. We have not talked about surplus from 2022 that just ended. We don't have that number for you yet.
Can I just maybe what I'd like to recommend that we do for this year with the clear understanding of what Dr. Bustles just said, that we're going to reevaluate this and look at what's fair. What I would suggest that we do is the Lake Murray at the ATAX Advisory Committee recommendation at 375,487, and then 75% of the 21,27,762 for this year.
As recommended by the committee.
No, 75% of that 21. And the full 375
The
for the
full
Lake
committee
Murray.
recommendation.
Well, Missy says that there are surplus funds coming through that hadn't been allocated yet.
That's what we're trying to get to, boss, is where we got those surplus funds.
We don't have them yet.
Well, we do have them. Don't we have them?
No, we don't know the surplus yet from June 30 that just ended, in part because the collections for state accommodations tax come in quarterly from the state. We won't get those until sometime in August.
And one of the reasons that I said this is that way, instead of reducing these even more to create more of a surplus, I'm counting that we're going to have some more surplus money.
So what you're saying, Joe, is 375 for.
375, 487 is what I would suggest for the capital city for this year, and then 75%, whoever's got a calculator, 2127 times 0.75.
I can't do that in my head.
But you follow where I'm coming from?
Yeah, that's all right.
Again, I try to preface this by saying I got no quarrel with anybody's budget. I don't want to put anybody in a bad way. But we've got to start as a city doing what other cities are doing and retaining our fair, we got to pay our fair share. I mean, that's without a
How
doubt.
are you going to determine our fair share?
Well, that's the question.
Well, I mean, we're not going to determine it today, but Howard, I would just suggest to you, and I'm not saying this is the measure, but let me put it in perspective for everybody.
Whenever you feel appropriate. I think Ms. Atria had a question.
No, I was just put it in perspective. I just think this is interesting for what it's worth. That if you take in Richland County alone, the city of Columbia population is 32.74%. If you want to look at it just on population. Richland, Lexington combined, the city of Columbia is 19.24%. Now, where we're paying on these and where our population is not, it doesn't.
The point of sending it to the subcommittee is to look at the summary and everything.
We're not getting any.
Okay,
Yeah, we're
good.
not going, that's what I say.
Perfect.
Today, we want to make sure everybody's got the money they need to operate this year, and now we got time.
But I do want to put a time frame on this, that when we send it to committee, which we can do tonight, that we have a resolve before the end of the year and have.
End
time
of
to-
calendar year,
Yeah,
December
end of
31st.
calendar year, so that when budget comes, that we're
That's
not
right.
surprising anybody if there are changes.
I agree with that.
And I would like to add to that, because I think it's important that we give everybody the ability to go see the counties and the cities that may not be contributing at all or contributing their fair share, and get them in the, get them in the program.
So did somebody throw a number out
It's
on
$1,595,821.
So about 1.6.
Make it
1.6,
round it to
1.6.
1.6
And
goes to the convention center at this, for the experience. $375, $48, $750 to go to Lake Murray at this point, and then we can, as we evolve, we can discuss from there. Just Atria, you wanted you're more than welcome.
I heard the conversation of state tax dollars and local tax dollars, and there is a difference. Just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that. The other point I wanted to make was, what does that mean going with this last year's over at the end of the year when that state check does come in? Because our organization has made some contractual commitments. So it's kind of important we know, and I'm sure for Experience Columbia as well. When we received the application this year to apply for these funds, we had under the understanding that it would still be the 8515. And as far as looking at other governments and to how they're spending their dollars, for instance, we promote a 4-county area. Saluda County has no accommodations tax money to give out. Also, the level of the amount of money you collect and accommodations taxes is where Turk kicks in and where they are looking at these large entities, these large governmental entities, to do what the law says, and that is the purpose of the accommodations tax money is to market, to fill your hotels, to generate more tax money. Thank you for all you're doing.
So I have a couple more questions, Missy. In terms of this surplus, is there a range of what you could estimate that we get?
So that's a good question. The budget for the year that just ended, 21-22, was only at about 1.4 million. I think we projected about 1.4, 1.5 million. So based on collections, I think we are already at those collections to date, or close to. So, I mean, we could have a several $100,000 surplus this year.
So I guess then my question is, we are funding Lake Murray at 100%, which is great. If we're going to have that surplus, how much of a surplus are you all looking for this year?
I think that's a discussion for the committee. That's the reason why we're sending it to the committee. I mean, this money's not getting spent between now and November, right?
Right, but then my question is, why are, where is the 1.6 million coming from? Is there a reason for that, or could we do 2 million or what was the thought process to cut that back? That's what I'm trying to understand.
We have some surplus here for us to use towards other, we're gonna discuss that we may want to use this towards parks or some other stuff. We traditionally, where we are, now, we know they got 1.2 last year, right? And 200 to Lake Murray. I mean, there's increases already at this point. And obviously, there's been discussion about they could be applicants for age tax as well, which they haven't in the past because of this. All this is up for discussion. I just don't want to go spend $2.5 million today without understanding what we may enhance other parts of our communities because we're limited on dollars. And we've invested everything here. We may in 3 months go, you know what, gentlemen, we're gonna send you another $500,000 because we have all this surplus and put it whole. We just don't know that yet.
So that's kind of where I think there's a little bit of confusion. We're talking about the surplus that comes from the state after June 30th, and then we're also talking about leaving some money in the pot that we already know we have, which is the 2.5. Is that correct? We're talking about two different pots of money.
This pot's getting spent right now. That's right. We don't know what the other one is. That's 2.5. We're talking about holding back essentially.
200,000. 500,000, because if you do 1.6.
Doesn't mean that we may not release it and think. If we have a whole lot come in from the state, we may say, you know what, we're gonna put 500 here, we're gonna put 500 over there, we may put 250 to enhance parks.
Oh, look here, we may get the windfall from heaven, and we get enough to do all of Finley Park at one swoosh. It ain't gonna happen, but, I mean.
Say it.
Are we sure because is the recommendations Are the recommendations listed here, Missy, for the other 4 entities, I guess, that applied at 0 because of the percentage breakout
Yes.
approach? Or is it also because there was some ineligibility issues?
Combination of both. Some
Do
of
we-
these were not
will the-
actually eligible, and then some of it was
The-
honoring,
For example, the high school league?
right, right.
Okay, so the council's gonna be given that information if they are doing this whole back approach, and I'm not saying that they're
Right.
gonna entertain that, but I think they need to have all the information.
And what I was thinking, Ms. Wilson, was when you look up there, the Black Pages was taking care of H-Tax. The Feed the City was evaluated by H-Tax. If the high school league, if that materializes, I don't think that I think that ask was too much to begin with, and we can always come back and make an allocation either out of H-Tax or A-Tax if it qualifies.
And we would need to reengage the.
I mean, one of the things, I don't want to change the subject. Let's just say we're going to charge our sports authority with perhaps looking at the high school league products as bowl games in our city and ask them to assist in finding sponsors and things like that that would cover that instead of us covering it as a city.
Yes, sir. Gotcha.
And we could bring back the Accommodations Tax Committee to reevaluate any additional allocations.
We're not taking, all that money is sitting on the sidelines currently
Right.
until we can take a look and make a decision. And depending on what comes in, we may do that, but I think it's wise for us to take this step forward.
And can I just would add, one of the reasons I think we're looking at this thing is as as the city manager, Ms. Kaufman, work to really refine a 4, 5, 6, 7 year maintenance CapEx and CapEx plan, we're identifying funding streams that can go in there to make that happen so we can plan ahead of time. And I tip my hat to Ms. Kaufman. I think this is a really good track for us to be on, to make sure we get these capital projects financed in the best way that lets us do more of them.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
During the application process, are the applicants made aware of what we think the projected amount will be?
I think well, when the applications are done, no, we don't usually know at that point. But it does get shared at some point, and plus, other budget discussions, but yes.
Okay. I just have heartburn about going 75%, going to 75%, would feel comfortable maybe with 2 million. And I think the other thing is treating the entities differently. I don't know what the rationale is with that.
It's a $500,000 increase, so.
Well, yeah, we would take $531,000 from them.
But we're adding $500,000 more than they got last year.
They're not taking away, they're getting more than they got last year.
Yeah.
I know that.
Can't work backwards.
Well, I know that part.
What they
but
ask
it's-
for and what they get are not the same numbers.
Right, and I totally get that. I'm just worried about for planning purposes because of what has traditionally been done for 15 years, how that impacts their budget. That's what I'm saying. And then I do think we should, I'm not arguing that we take money from both, but I do think that I think that the convention center might feel like, why you take the money from me? You didn't take the money from the other organization. I'm not advocating to take from both, but I do have some concern about one entity taking the burden.
I would just say that if something happens, a big event comes up, there's nothing that precludes somebody from coming back to the well. I think this is a really good way to do this.
We do fund 2.2 million of their shortfall.
I was getting ready to say that we didn't
And
mention.
it's not like we're not funding them in multiple ways, and which is a lot more than the other entities are funding in the split. So, look, if something comes up and there's things, we know it's there. We're not spending this money.
Well, so are we saying that we fund that, so there is a difference between how we treat the two organizations?
Well, let me say,
Justify the difference.
Well, I mean, I could look at hospitality and make the same case that we give them $50,000 and $75,000 to other organizations, and we're only giving 10 and 2% and 5% to others, I mean, everything plays a
When-
different role based on its needs and outcomes.
Well, no, all I'm saying is I'd rather we explain why we treat them differently.
But I just wanted, for clarification, because I think we're not going to talk about the local aid tax or the TDF today, are we? No. That's what I'm saying.
There's just
And what the
information.
mayor is saying is just, I mean, right now, we're funding basically a $2.2 million shortfall out of the local aid tax side to the convention center on top of that.
And that's a distinction. That's what I'm saying. That
Okay.
is a distinction that we can,
That's what-
So they have other pots of money from the city, yeah.
that's all I'm saying.
It's important for people to know, like some of you all have information from being around this for a while that not everybody knows. And I think it's important for us to say it out loud so that people understand the full picture of why we're making the decisions that we are. So,
Yes,
Uh,
Mr. Duvall.
The opioid funds are being dispersed or talked about now, and I've seen some information on spreadsheets on what the city of Columbia may be getting for the distribution of opioid funds. Have y'all?
That's your director, your appointees right there,
Oh.
Dr. Bustles.
You're the vice chairman, aren't you?
She controls the purse strings there.
Well, I hope Dr. Bustles will make sure that her home city is well taken care of.
well, I will recuse myself for the applications that we put in, but we do have what they call a municipal allocation that will be coming over the next year. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we have it's several $100,000 that's allocated this first year for Columbia.
Have you got a list of the things that we can spend it on?
Yeah, we are creating that criteria as we speak. So hopefully we can release that, and we plan on doing multiple. There's like going to be 3 kind of cycles throughout the year so that you can apply as it's appropriate for your project.
Glad we're in good hands.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, when you look at the breakdown and how long, and we don't get near the amount that I think that the community should get out of that money.
I think next time we should name our city attorney's office as our legal counsel on that thing. I'm not so sure the lawyers didn't win on that one.
What they always do. Okay, we ready to go upstairs and?
So just to summarize, we are going to do the full and then
1.6 is what I last heard, but then I heard some discussions about something else. So 1.6 and hold the other until further discussions.
Yeah.
And no discussions yet of surplus either. We don't know yet what.
We don't know what
surplus
the number is, so you can't have a conversation about something you don't know.
And you're able to report on what we decided on the H-tax, which was the line item.
I'm going to coordinate, I'm going to collaborate with some others that were also listening and taking good notes, and we'll have a summary for you to have at your meeting this
Mayor
evening.
took great notes.
Yeah. And then that was all the other,
You need a motion to adjourn, or do we just
Well,
adjourn?
let me just say this, and I certainly appreciate the conversation, and I think it's already been referred to committee where we can have an in-depth, dive deep into the weeds of all that we're talking about today. It would certainly be helpful for us to hear that committee's report afterwards.
and we're going to formally refer at the city council meeting. Yes?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Motion to adjourn, or we just adjourn?
Let the record show that we